Good afternoon, everyone, and thanks for joining us once again for JKSB's deep dive on various sectors. Today we have Mr. Zafir Hashim and Mr. Upul Jinadasa. Mr. Zafir Hashim is the president of John Keells Holdings Transportation Industry Group and the Plantation sector as well. He's been with the group for 21 years and joined in 2003. He was seconded to Lanka Marine Services, where he served as CEO from 2005 to 2015. He served as a member of the Transportation Sector Committee from 2005 and over the last 2 decades held the position of CEO at John Keells Logistics Lanka, Mackinnon's Mackenzie Shipping, Mack International Freight, and Mackinnon's Travels. He has an MSc in Chemical Engineering from the University of Birmingham. Mr. Upul Jinadasa has over 3 decades of experience in the maritime industry in both shipping and ports in Sri Lanka and abroad. He started his career as an IT expert and later moved to port terminal operations and has been instrumental in SAGT reaching world-class operational benchmarks for both the company itself as well as the Port of Colombo. Prior to joining SAGT in April 1999, Mr. Jinadasa has held various local and international positions with the National Institute of Business Management and the American President Lines APL. He is a professional member of the British Computer Society and an alumnus of the Indian School of Business and Kellogg's Business School. Thanks for joining us today, gentlemen. Just to start off, if you could give us an idea of the state of play in both your sectors. I know last year has been a time of some turmoil with the Red Sea passage going through issues with the rebel attacks on various shipping lines, which from our knowledge appears to have died down a little. And also, I know with the impending US-China trade issues that there was a bit of a logjam in the ports, which also affected traffic to and from the Port of Colombo. But nevertheless, Port of Colombo, I think, did something like over 7.7 million TEUs in volume for last year. Mr. Jindas, if you would start.
Yes, thanks, Amin, and it's a pleasure to be with you all this evening. And yes, as you quite rightly said, we had a very, very successful year last in 24. Starting from December 2023, when the Middle East, the trouble in the Middle East began, and then the Red Sea was under threat. So the ships were finding alternative routes to go lower. So then what happened was, the only available alternative route was to come via the Cape of Good Hope, that is, passing to South Africa, taking the longer route. And when you come out of the Cape of Good Hope, you have two options. One is either you come straight up to the Indian subcontinent, or take a bit of a deviation and go straight up to the Strait of Malacca. So that is to Singapore. So now, but the Indian market is very, very, it's growing, and then there's huge volume. So the shipping lines couldn't bypass the Indian subcontinent, even though they didn't want to take the left turn and then go towards the Middle East because it's a costly affair. And they started calling over Colombo and then trying to hub it out from Colombo to the Indian subcontinent and also the Gulf. So going back to 1980s or the late 80s, and when I joined APL in 91, all the APL big ships were turning around in Colombo and going back to the Far East. And then, we were feeding, there were feeders operating from Colombo, feeding the containers to the Middle East, the Pakistan and that part of the world. So now, what happened was, technically that the old phenomenon came back. Look, all the ships were trying to call into Colombo because of the trouble in Middle East, and then to hub it out from Colombo, and then the smaller ships to take the cargo to the Middle East. Of course, then what happened was the demand grew rapidly, and so there were times that the port, the terminals here, the 3 terminals had to cope up with volumes which are beyond our capacity. To tell you the truth, the SAGT, the physical capacity, physically, the number of TEUs that we can hold in our terminal is 26,000. If it is 100% full, there's no other space. But there were times that we had to go beyond that, and there were times that we handled about 28,000 boxes in a terminal. So we had to close down the truck lanes, and we had to do a lot of other maneuvering to accommodate that. So that was a demand. So with that backdrop, we were able to surpass all our historic milestones in the Port of Colombo. So we reached almost 7.8 million TUs as the highest ever capacity throughput that we have achieved so far in the history. But now going back, you're right, Naveen. You mentioned that the port, other terminals, there is the drop in volumes that they're experiencing. But SAGT were able to sustain some volumes and then have a double-digit growth when compared to last year's January. That was the reason, like the Chinese New Year had and then the volumes that are coming out of that were getting rushed through the ships here. Majority of the ships like the Maersk and the Hapag-Lloyd are calling what SAGT, and they had a big demand, and also their new alliance that they are forming, Gemini, also falling into place. So there was a surge of volumes that were coming with them. So with that, like we had a bit of influx of volumes that made us to achieve this the increase in throughput in the month of January. But going forward, the volumes are a bit volatile now. So we see a slight drop in the volumes compared to the previous year. The simple reason is that the global trade is now affected, and everybody is watching what is going to happen in the Middle East with the new developments in the US. And so with all these things happening and the tariff war is starting and all whatnots, so there's a bit of a impact on the supply chain. So that we see that there is a slight drop in the volumes. So we are working with the lines to see what the exact future going to be. It's very hard to predict at this moment in time. Thanks.
Thanks so much, Mr. Jinadasa. And Mr. Hashim, if you would give us like an update and prospects for 2025.
Yeah, thanks, Naveen, for having us. And good afternoon to the rest. So I think Upul pretty much, I think, summarized well in terms of the shipping industry. But let me just put a little bit of touch as to how that affects the bunkering industry, which is a large portion of our business in the transportation sector. I mean, of course, in our transport portfolio, ports is number one, but bunkering is also a large piece. So if you look at the bunkering volume, what has happened is because of the disruption that Upul spoke about, we have seen a massive growth in volume. And this Red Sea disruption actually started in 2023 end, so about November, December. Since then, if you actually compare the pre-Red Sea to current, we have seen a growth of bunkering volume of about 50% in Sri Lanka. So that's a huge significant shift. We used to do about, in total Sri Lanka, we used to do about 45,000 metric tons a month. Now that has gone up to about, at the peak, initially the first 3 months that in 2024, it went up to almost 75,000 metric tons. But of course, India also picked up and they sort of also supplied bunkers in many of their ports. So we had a slight drop, but now we are sort of hovering around this 60 to 70,000 metric tons mark from the 40 to 45,000 metric ton. The main reason for this is what, like Upul said, it is mainly because of two reasons in the case of bunkers. One is because the vessels are going around the Cape of Good Hope. There is a larger deviation. So the vessels are traveling more, which means they need more bunkers. The second reason for the increase in bunker requirement in Sri Lanka is because some other, established bunkering hubs such as Fujairah, Salalah, Egypt and all that became out of reach for some of these vessels because they're not taking that route and they're going around Africa. So Sri Lanka being blessed with the strategic location that we are in, we got most of those volumes. So I think that's where the jump mainly came, and we had about a 50% increase in volume. Another reason that also sort of helped us in the last year for volumes to increase was because we, in addition to Colombo, which is predominantly the main hub for bunkering in Sri Lanka, we also now have bunker offerings from Hambantota and Trincomalee. So with these two locations also now getting established, that's more an organic thing where I think there's also demand being built up for Sri Lanka because of these two current new locations that is being now established, which is overall, even the Red Sea impact goes away, it is still, overall it's a good thing for Sri Lanka. So that has helped. Plus, we have also introduced a new product called HSFO, which that is the high sulfur fuel oil, which we used to have long years ago. Due to capacity limitations, we kind of dropped that off our offerings. But we have reintroduced that last year, and that is also helping our volumes. Probably, in the later questions, I will kind of address some of the other issues.
Thanks a lot, Mr. Hashim. And Mr. Jinadasa, one of the amazing things about SAGT has been how you all have essentially operated at double the capacity that you all were built for. Can you give us an explanation of how you guys did that?
Yes, Naveen, when we designed the terminal back in 99, and then, okay, now the product mix in the port of Colombo are basically the domestic and transshipment. And then the domestic, when you look at it, the give or take, it is about 1 million TEUs that we are handling. But like last year that we handled 7.8 million. So that means 6.8 million comes as transshipment. So the transshipment, for us to handle transshipment, that is a cargo belonging to some other country coming here and then loading into a ship and then taking it away. Similarly, the inward cargo coming here and then we are delivering it to the destination close by, one of the other closer countries. So now the time that the container stays inside the port, which we call dwell, that when we planned SAGT out in 99, it was around say 8 to 9 days. So the physical capacity of a port is decided. There are three things that we have to look at. One is the quay side, how much ships that you can handle and at what kind of productivity that you can offer. So that means how fast that you can turn around a ship. Yeah. So the second one is, the gates that you have and how many containers that you can handle through the gates. So whether it is through the gate or whether it is through the quay wall, like all the containers come into the yard. So yard is the main constraint. So, it's a finite resource. So you have we have SAGT 5,500 ground slots, like the space that is marked on the ground where you can stack containers. So technically, as I said, like physical capacity that we have is 26,000, but you can't operate a port at its physical capacity. So you need a buffer. So we operate at about 20. We are aiming to operate it at about 20,000 TEUs a month, at any given time. So now what happens is when the dwell time goes high, the number of containers that you can exchange using the same slot reduces. Because, if a container stays in one slot for about, say, 8-9 days, you can utilize that slot for another container. So then, that is a factor of the throughput. So you can't handle any other container, even though you have the berth space available. There is no yard space for you to bring a container in. So what we did was, from 99 onwards, it was a multiple fold approach that we had. So we focused on improving the productivity. So the first is the quay side productivity. So we brought in a lot of technology. We brought in the new equipment and we trained our people well. And then we had the processes synchronized. So we were able to deliver, a 25 plus productivity moves per hour at the quay side. So then we create space for more ships to come in. The before SAGT came in, it was less than 10 moves per hour at the Queen Elizabeth Quay as well as the JCT at that time. So then we increased the benchmark to about say 25 plus. So then the more ships can come in because we complete ships early, so that we created space. So when you bring in more ships, that you can connect the boxes which are in the terminal faster because you have more ships coming in. Yeah. So in Singapore, that for a week there is about say 150 odd ships calling over there. But here that we have about say at a given time that about for 20, less than 20 ships a week. Yeah. So now when you increase the number of ships calling, that means you can evacuate boxes faster. So that thereby that we reduce our dwell. So we were able to bring it down to about say 3 days. So whereas we planned it at 9 days, and then we were able to bring it down to 3 days with mere efficiency, and then bringing in more ships. That created an opportunity for us to perform more, do more throughput. So that is how we achieved the double, like double the throughput that we planned to achieve in 99.
Thanks, Mr. Jinadasa. Mr. Hashim, if you could also give us a better idea of the competitive landscape of the bunkering market. I know Lanka IOC serves up in Trincomalee. You would just talk about Hambantota and Goa. And I would imagine the vast majority of bunkering volumes are done in Colombo, must be close to 90%. And you would talk about the different grades of fuel, and I would imagine sourcing them through the regional refineries sometimes can also be a challenge depending on the production schedules of the refineries. Can you just talk us through like that kind of landscape?
Yeah, so basically, as I said, I think it's been a reasonably good year in terms of volume. Unfortunately, I think we had an impact in the first 9 months of the financial year. Was mainly the margin was an impact for us. And that is because of multiple reasons that we had fluctuating oil prices. And in the last 1.5 years, the volatility that we have seen in the global oil price, I have never seen in the last probably 20 years. So this volatility sometimes had a huge impact in terms of our margin. And also there has been a higher level of local competition, which has affected our margins in Colombo. But saying that, this quarter, the start has been reasonably good. January has been very good. February also looks good. And the way it looks like March, I think this quarter will be much better than what we did in the first 9 months of last year. In terms of the competitive nature, see, I think when we look at competition, there's two ways. One is the internal competition, that is what is domestic. But I think more than that, we concentrate on what is internationally, because really a ship, when we say competition, a ship has an option of either buying bunkers from Colombo or it can buy from anywhere else. So really our competition is out there. So if you look at the region that we are in a region where the world's largest amount of bunker supplies happens in this region. Because to our west is Singapore, which is the world's largest bunkering port, which caters to about 55 million metric tons a year. Then that's to our right, and to our left is where we have Fujairah, which is the world's second, third largest bunkering hub, which caters to about 18 to 20 million. So these two ports are the two largest ports, which is sitting right, next to in Sri Lanka, right? So really, from a competitive perspective, if you look at the pricing differential between these two ports and Colombo, we have a huge price differential. The price differential is about $55 to $65 on the LSFO, which is 80% of the global volume that is traded, right? Then we have India. If you look at India, it's a different story when you look at the west coast of India as opposed to the east coast of India. If you look at the west coast of India, the fuel oil, again, 80% of the volume, they are about $25 cheaper than us, because these are ports like Cochin and Mumbai. And then if you look at the east coast of India, we are much more competitive compared to the east coast of India. That is on the fuel oil. The reason for this is mainly because of two main reasons. One is because most of these places have ex-refined products. So they have refineries, and there are bunker products that comes out of these refineries. And so their cost is much cheaper than what we can sort of get. In Sri Lanka, we don't have ex-refined products. So what we have to do is we pretty much have to buy from the market prices in Singapore. We have to freight it, bring it here. And then there are certain tariffs that we have to pay here. So by the time you add all those things, really, the cost between us and Singapore is, as I said, it's about $55 to $60. So really, when we look at the market segmentation of our customers, any vessel that has touching either Singapore or Fujairah really is not a customer for us, because they wouldn't buy that volume from Colombo unless otherwise there's an emergency or for topping up reasons. They would go to one of these ports. But most of our customers are vessels that flies in the Indian subcontinent. These are feeder vessels. We do, I mean, we sort of cater to a whole raft of different types of vessels, but these are mostly sort of trading in the Indian subcontinent, plus vessels that is going from east coast of India into Africa. The interesting part is the fact that in this region itself is growing. Like Upul said, India is growing at a very, very fast pace, right? So vessels moving in and out of India itself is going to grow. And with that, I think we are going to have a huge opportunity. Plus, if you look at the capacity in Colombo itself, currently we have, Upul said we do 7.8 million TEUs. In the next 2 to 3 years, the capacity in the Colombo port is going to pretty much double, because you will have East Container Terminal coming, you will have West Container Terminal coming. In probably 3 years, you will have both of them operating at, full capacity, will have full capacity. So with the doubling of capacity means more containers, which means more feeder vessels, and the bunkering is going to the volumes of bunkers will get better. So I think from a volume perspective, we see a lot of sort of benefit. I think one thing that we really need to manage is from a cost perspective. Let me just quickly touch upon the volume breakdown itself. So Colombo, which was about doing 90% of the volume before, with the market expanding, as I said, it's now expanded by almost about 50%. Colombo now is about 81% of the total Sri Lankan bunker volume. Hambantota is about 10%, and Trincote is about 9%.
Thanks a lot, Mr. Hashim. Mr. Jinadasa, Mr. Hashim also, you could join in to explain this. How has transshipment being such a huge part of Colombo's volume, how has the feeder market changed? I know Africa East Africa has been a bigger part of the transshipment that we are supplying as well. India is obviously a growing market and looks like it'll be a growing market for the next 20 years. How has the feeder market, I think there's a lot of feeder activity to the Maldives and Bangladesh as well. How has the feeder market changed in terms of what their requirements are? Have the vessels become technologically more efficient? How does SAGT cater to them?
Yes. Now, our aspiration of becoming one of the global hubs in the Indian subcontinent, the feedering is extremely important. Like if not for the feeder ships, there is no survival as a mega hub. So now what happened in the past was that now, for example, if I may, give you some figures now, say the total market, the Indian subcontinent market, the number of containers that were either originated or, destined towards the subcontinent was about 25 million TEUs. Yeah. So out of that 25 million, the last year that our domestic volume was about 1 million containers. And then, like 6.8 million were transshipment. But, that 6.8 million doesn't mean that we handle 6.8 million physically, because we count for revenue the load and discharge, arrival and the departure as two separate events. So technically, we handled only about 3.4 million of that 25 million in the market available. That's the hinterland that we have. So out of that, it's about 21 million, 21 and a half is going elsewhere. Yeah. So now that is to Malaysia, Singapore on the other side, and then basically from on the west coast side, the Dubai and other ports in that part of the world. So now we cannot attract all that 25 million. It depends on the trade routes, and then the optimum routes that shipping lines will decide what is the best route that they should be taking that. So, but we have a potential, huge potential, like now as Zafir rightfully said, the capacity at the port of Colombo is expected to double by about 27, that we will be reaching around 15 million capacity. So that when you have that, then we have to find a room or the market to fill that up as well. we already have a market there, but it's up to us to how to market ourselves, and then to how to make ourselves much more smarter, and then to attract those volumes to come into Colombo. So as you quite rightly said, Naveen, yes, the feedering is extremely important. Now traditionally we have been catering to the Indian subcontinent market, uh, you know, till few years back. So, but now there is new markets are evolving, like in the African the markets. Now there are lots of services that are operating between Colombo and the Africa, bringing a lot of volume from Africa into Colombo, and then like hubbing it out from Colombo. So as a port, we should look at, as a government as well, then we should look at giving more incentives to create a maritime ecosystem here where the feedering also are available. So the if when you look at Singapore and in Dubai, yeah, those companies are based there. So there are feedering companies headquartered in those the two countries, so that that is how their maritime centers have excelled. So we also should look at it. There are the sizable feeder network operating here, but that the ability to operate feeders also depends on the number of ports that are available in the other parts of the world as well. Like the subcontinent in Bangladesh, there is a bit of a restriction there, like the available berth space. Now they are also now venturing into building some more ports. So what happens is when a region, when a big hub port is being built or emerging in the subcontinent, it gives rise to other businesses in other parts of the world, as the adjoining countries as well. So you need more ports to come up, otherwise you can't feed into that, right? So that is happening, and then we have to work with all the neighboring countries, because we are complementing each other. We are not competing with each other. Yeah, we are only competing with the big hubs in the Middle East and in the ASEAN region. So that is how we should project ourselves. And the G2G efforts also have to come in, and then the B2B efforts also have to come in. And we are involved with the trade and the ports in other countries, and then trying to strike partnerships for mutual benefit.
Thanks a lot, Mr. Jinadasa. Mr. Hashim, with the feeder vessels, a lot of the volumes are the majority of the volumes, or the volumes that are growing more out of port than in port through the barges?
No, not really, because what happens is with the feeder vessels, because it is coming into the port for cargo operations, they tend to take bunkers inside the port itself. But what we have witnessed is with the port volumes going up, what has happened is the size of feeder vessels that has been in this route has started to increase in size. So if I take, like, let's say about 6-7 years ago, the average stem for a feeder vessel would be about 150 to 200 metric tons. Each stem size would be about 200 metric tons. Today, those stem sizes have gone to 350 to 400 metric tons. So today there are big shipping lines such as MSC, CM, Maersk, who are also operating certain feeder lines, which we never saw in the previously. And some of these feeder vessels are quite large, and so the average stem sizes we have seen increasing, which has also helped us to increase the volume. Then just on something that Upul said, just to add on something, what we had seen in Colombo is the fact that the development, whether it's bunkering or the development in the port business, is mostly led by capacity building. First and foremost, you need to invest on capacity. Where I think our growth has got stagnated, whether it was in bunkering because of limitation of tanks, in the growth of our port businesses because of limitation in capacity, that has really curtailed the rate at which that we could have grown. Because if you take the port capacity building, every time we added capacity, the port saw a step-up jump in demand. So for 2012, I don't know, 12, 13, whatever, when CICT came, suddenly I'm sure Upul will know these numbers, but we saw a step-up jump in terms of the demand that came in. Then SAGT that came in when it started in 1999, 2000, we saw the same thing. And we expect the same thing to happen when probably CWIT also comes in. The same thing we have seen in the bunkering business as well. It is sometimes the limitation in our infrastructure, which sort of curtails the growth rates for us.
So, I mean, just to ask the both of you, you feel that the building of capacity has been too slow in terms of the demand that we can see through the Indian subcontinent and other places?
Exactly.
Of course.
So,
Yeah, please, no, please go ahead.
yes. Now, well, just to share with you that, like the East Terminal that is now being built, not yet ready, but it is included in our concession, the SAGD concession as a phase 2. We should have started building that in 2005. So if we did that, like we were interested, but the government was not. So that, like if we did that, so that means, by around 2007, we would have been operating the East Terminal. By now, we in Sri Lanka, the Colombo will be building probably would be building the WCT2 now. So imagine if we had that capacity now, how much of money we could have made during this the period. Yeah. So we are a bit late, but that we are we better late than never. And then like we should at least now get things going, and then create capacity. As Zafir said, the CWIT is expected to come in probably by the end of this year or early next year, and then that will add about 3.5 million into the fold. East Terminal is a bit slow, but like when it is completed, another 3.5 million will come in. So that is how we expect to increase the capacity to about 15 million by 27. So definitely when the capacity is available, the demand follows. And then we have seen that, when you look at the growth of the Colombo, whenever that we added the capacity, and then, the demand followed.
Thank you. Mr. Jinadasa, just to stick with you, I mean, one of the exciting things in ports has been automation and how there's an opportunity to kind of reduce the human labor component used in a port terminal. How has SAGT kind of capitalized on that? Is there, is there future capex that you think will be needed to make SAGT more in line with automation or global
Yes,
standards
well,
for automation?
yeah, unfortunately, the SAGT concession that we only have about say 4.5 years left in the current concession, but we are working with the government on an extension. But certainly, there's a lifetime for all the equipment that whatever you are using in the port. So we have reached that life time of some of the equipment that we already have, and then we are planning to invest on the new equipment. That investment decision had to be made in terms of either the concessional requirements or the regulatory requirements, or the business, the commercial requirements. Like in terms of like if we get the extension, that's going to be a different the business model that we will be operating at SAGT. But then there's another factor that we have to. One of the very important factor is the safety. The safety is paramount. Like these are very heavy equipment that have been operated. And then, like letting people moving here and there, it's very, very extremely dangerous. So that has been the focus from the day one at SAGT. When SAGT started the operating the Queen Elizabeth Quay, the formal QEQ, and we only had, when we completed the entire development, we only had about say 700 people working at SAGT, whereas the Ports Authority, had about say 8,000 people. Yeah. So now that shows the difference between the efficiencies at SAGT and the Ports Authority. So the technology and the automation played the pivotal role there. And then we automated from the day one that we automated, we brought in a lot of new IT systems, and then we made it fully synchronized, and then eliminated as much as possible the documentation. So we work with the authorities like customs also, and then replace some of those manual physical document handling with digital interfaces. And we made a lot of good progress with them. And then the SLPA. And then came the COVID. Then we realized that the dependency on human, like we are a dependent terminal. So the human factor was very, very crucial for the port performance. So then we thought of looking at, like the different technologies available. The two reasons is that, to be an effective hub, you need to offer unique services to the customers. You see now, there are already now, say, we may be, Sri Lanka is positioned geographically, but that alone is not enough for us to attract business. So that gives, like the optimum advantage of, routing and all that, but it depends on the services that we can offer to the shipping lines. So then if you don't automate, and if you don't bring in the latest technology, it would be very difficult for us to cater to the demands of the customers. For us to attract the volume, we have to either in par with the best the maritime centers like Dubai or in Singapore, or we should be better than them. So we are trying to be better than them. Yeah. So that we can attract the much more business from the Indian subcontinent and also the emerging the markets into Colombo. So the automation is required when the need for speed is there, and then manually it would be very difficult for us to consistently deliver or cater to those demands. Yeah. So when the speed is more, the accuracy and the integrity also had to be looked after. So because of that, the automation is very, very crucial for the port going forward. So we are evaluating a lot of things. We are currently doing a lot of implementation, and we are bringing in the automated gates, the OCR based automation. And also we are about to trial an autonomous truck. We are retrofitting 2 of our existing trucks with an autonomous technology, driverless, and then to operate it in a mixed traffic environment and then see how it works. So that kind of technologies are already available now, affordable. So we can look at and then see if it works well, then it will create a different ball game altogether in the port. Ultimately, what we are looking at is how do we offer a unique service proposition to our customers to attract them to Colombo.
Thank you, Mr. Jinadasa. Mr. Hashim, I suppose automation in provision of bunkering might be a little bit harder considering the nature of the business, but also, I mean, even in terms of things like decarbonization and alternate fuels and so on, there must be scope in terms of using technology in that as well.
So just to touch a little bit more on the port side, I think if you look at our new investment that John Keells has done with Adani, this is pretty much highly sophisticated automated terminal. Other than for the autonomous vehicles, we are international class, which we just now sort of concluded phase 1. So we will have 1.6 million TEU capacity. Hopefully we will just sort of brought the first vessel today. And this vessel, this terminal will be fully automated. So again, like Upul said, this once it sort of really hits that optimal, efficiency, this will have very, very high productivity. It will be very safe. What the international customer wants, this terminal will be able to give. So really, it is from a country's perspective, this is not a dream anymore. This has already been done. So I think we are probably in this region next to Vizhinjam, where the Adani other port is again a very highly automated terminal. Other than for the Vizhinjam terminal, will be the first fully sort of automated terminal here in Colombo. So I'm happy to say that, and this will bring in a new set of benchmarks for the Colombo port going forward. Then on the bunkering side, again, in terms of physical sort of asset automation, if you leave that aside, really here what we are really trying to do is, especially from a demand planning perspective, plus from a pricing perspective, in order to do better yield management, we are kind of working with our group subsidiary called Octave in order to use advanced analytical tools to try and see how do we better demand plan. Plus also in terms of our pricing. Let me just quickly explain a little bit about that. It's quite interesting because we are in advanced stages now. Really in our business, one of the key things is it's not only just about the volume that we sell, it's also about how do we maximize on the margin that we really make. If you really look in this business, there are a multitude of factors that affects pricing. It is not only local issues, but it also is international issues, geopolitical issues. Suddenly something happens, the US president would say something and the price changes, right? Or some other thing happens in, let's say, in India, then the price changes. Then again, the price gaps between India and Singapore, if it changes, suddenly you might see a demand spike. So a slight thing that happens in the region or global can have an impact on our price. So with that, that is number one. Then from a local perspective, how much of supply each one has, how much of supply each one is bringing, also has an impact, because if somebody imports more than what is required, given the fact that we have limited storage, then that party becomes sort of in a distressed situation to evacuate products. So they start selling at a cheap price. Then your margin comes down because the whole market goes. So there's a multitude of factors that affects our margin. Now, what we have been doing is we have had a manual tool where we kind of put all these factors in. And then on top of that, we also need to there are sort of analysts who also looks to see what would happen to the forward market. Is it a backwardated market, or what sort of expectations are there in terms of price? But what we have realized is doing this with this manual tool is, it's too much of data that's going in, and you really can't do. So we are working with Octave to try and have a tool using advanced analytics, which would help us in terms of making better pricing decisions and also demand planning. And hopefully we feel that with this coming in, our margins should get better. So, really not related to automated, but more in terms of, I think in the bunkering business, I think this is a key thing. But more from a decarbonization question that you asked, I think that is going to be, that's a huge question. I think it's not only for the marine sector, as you know, because of the Paris Agreement, it's going to affect all sorts of industries, aviation, maritime, the industries and everything. But if I'm to talk about the maritime sector itself, even though the largest portion of world's cargo is moved through shipping, the emission that the shipping industry puts into the environment is only 3%. So the IMO is the sort of the monitoring body of that's the International Maritime Organization, which is the governing body of the maritime sector. They have set sort of targets after the Paris Agreement in terms of how do we decarbonize the maritime industry. So there are targets that has been set for 2030, 2040, and 2050. These were very fluid at the moment, but this year there is going to be some critical meetings that will happen. 2025, that's the set target date. In 2025, there's going to be very more sort of solid targets that will be set for the maritime industry's decarbonization plan. The issue in this whole thing is that what is going to happen is the normal fuel that we are currently using, that's the fuel oil and the gas oil, will go off the market over a period. Then we will come up with these alternate fuels. In a summary, if I am to say, this alternate fuel, there are multiple alternate fuels that people are talking about. So people are talking about methanol, ammonia, they are talking about biofuels, they're talking about hydrogen, they're talking about LNG. So it's really not one. It is a multiple different alternate fuels that you're talking. So when it's like that, it becomes very difficult for shipping lines, or it becomes very difficult for countries to take a call on which product should you really cater to? Because from a shipping, let's say you're a Maersk, now you're taking a call in terms of I need to build 20 ships the next year. What do I build the ships on? Do I build the ships on methanol? Do I build the ships on ammonia? So really what is going on is now the shipping world, each one is taking their own call. Maersk is going on methanol. Somebody else will take a call on ammonia. So really each one is taking their own sort of call and saying, I'm going to build vessels. So 95% of the vessels that's being built in the last 2 years, what is going to come up in the next couple of years, is nothing to do with the current fuel oil, gas oil. Some are dual fuel where you can use this plus alternate fuel, but it's all alternate fuels, right? So, but this complication is there. Then if you look at more hubs like Singapore and Fujairah, because they have the money, they are catering to storing these different types of fuel. LNG, methanol, ammonia, they have the money and they are doing it. But just imagine countries like Sri Lanka, what do we really do? We can't develop all types of storage because some of these storages are like, you have to store under cryogenic conditions, and it's really, really cost billions of dollars, hundreds of millions of dollars. So we are currently in a bit of a pickle because we don't really have a strategic direction. We really don't know what we should be doing. So I think one party in the country can't take a call. It has to be all stakeholders sitting, and the government really has to have an energy plan, because this doesn't, as I said, it only doesn't impact the maritime sector, but it impacts everything. It impacts industries, maritime sector, the aviation sector, and your retail, all your vehicles and things like that. So there's a lot more of the whole decarbonization, but I just try to summarize.
So that the effects of the sulfur cap regulation will be nothing compared to this disruption then?
Oh, nothing. Because, Naveen, the sulfur cap was a very simple one compared to this, because the sulfur cap was in the existing fuel, you had just reduced the 3.5% to 0.5%. Everybody knew that's the target. You have to reduce the 3.5 to 0. Here, really nobody knows what is it?
What kind of fuel even?
What fuel is going to be coming, and where are these fuels going to be there? Because, for example, Sri Lanka, I can be assured, we can't have all types of fuel. Because, for example, to build LNG here, or for example, ammonia being very, very toxic, the types of tanks and the investment that you need is very much higher than let's say, a biofuel or a methanol. So, and also you just can't invest, you won't get a return if you just invest only for bunkering purposes. You have to look at it at a more strategic level. You have to look at it more broad-based and say, from a country level, what is it that we need to do?
Thanks, Mr. Hashim. Mr. Jinadasa, I mean, recently with the issues that they've had in port congestion, so on, the government announced plans of starting supplying more land for warehousing, more adjacent to the port of Colombo. There have also been talk of digitizing and maybe streamlining the customs operations and so on. What is your perspective on that? Would it help in terms of operational efficiencies for you at SAGT? Hello? Sorry, Mr. Jinadasa, I think you might have been muted.
Yeah. Sorry. So the problem that we had in the past was that the customs openly came out and said they can only handle about 500 containers a day. Yeah. But then they were releasing, double the figure daily basis, and the trucks come and, pick it up and then just wait on the road, waiting a slot at the customs inspection, whatever the place. But the customs themselves know that they can only handle 500. Yeah. So, but they are continuously releasing about, say, 1,000 boxes a day. So now, then that problem won't disappear. No? So that will there is a backlog getting created every day, and then the long queue is getting affected. But then, more than the roads getting clogged, the problem that we had was that, in a transshipment business, we have 3 terminals operating, as very soon it's going to be 4. And then there are volumes that need to be moved between these terminals, which we call inter-terminal transfers. The ship that brings in cargo from India or wherever to SAGT, and we need to connect it to either CICT for a bigger ship. Yeah. So those are transported overland from SAGT to CICT using trucks. So when the trucks are not available and trucks are held up with import containers just idling on the road, so then that the volume gets affected. So there it became a big issue. Look, how are we going to move these boxes between the terminals with no trucks available? So now we have been working with customs, but of course they have a physical limitation, but they have to figure out a way to change what they do. Like now they say the government has given them a very, stringent targets. Look, you have to earn about, say, 2 trillion rupees of revenue. So that they reckon that, the only way that they can do that is by checking each and every box, so that they can, pick up something and then impose fines and then, earn money. So that way, that is one way of satisfying that need. When customs tell that to the authorities also, authorities goes on a defensive mode because the government needs money. So they can't go against the customs also, saying that, no, don't do that. So now what we have to look at is we have to find a better way of, getting people to comply with the law and then declare proper and pay the dues and then make it efficient, and then you can take the box out without any issue. So it is a like a multiple, we have to tackle it in multiple fronts. One is that the people have to be disciplined. There is a sizable amount of the importers into this country. They manipulate things. Yeah, so that has to stop. Like unless that, like the people don't realize it, that we are doing so much harm to ourselves by, like trying to do this, then the customs has no choice but to go and check it physically. Yeah. So now all these are linked. You can't take it one in isolation and say, look, once you fix this part, the customs, and then everything will be sorted. So all of us have to resolve, look, we are going to do it proper. Yeah. Once that is done proper, then of course, there is no need for the authorities to go deep into those things and then hold these containers for a long, long time. So one way of looking at it is, making it open and digital. Yeah. So that, like certain processes that are archaic here, they have to change. And then the customs and the authorities have to accept digitally and then process in advance. And then certain things that need to be, like there is a risk control criteria that the customs have. And then based on intelligence and the past performance and then the KYC basis, and they should be able to handle those. So we should be prepared to explore those options. Other countries does it, but they are doing it. So that's how they have their, the better facilitation in those countries. So, but the customs and all other authorities, all of us must understand, look, all these are connected. So you can't take it in isolation. So when the trucks are not available, so the truck, you can't do the ITT here. The ITT is affecting the transshipment business. Then the shipping lines won't bring the transshipment boxes here, right? So we have to work together and then, not to do what we have been doing for donkey's years, continuously into the future, but we have to relook at it critically, evaluate it, and then look at other options, which we have been working with the authorities, very slow though, right? But we are pushing them. So I think we will make some headway going forward.
Thanks. And just sticking with you, Mr. Jinadasa, what is the approach that you guys at SAGT have taken towards labor relations, ports being such a hugely labor-intensive unit? And I know having a government presence on the opposite side also possibly might even complicate things with your relations with the unions. How has that gone, and like what kind of perspective can you bring to the future?
The labor relations or the relationship relations, the employee relations here in a port is very, very crucial. If the people are not geared and motivated, we won't be able to achieve what we are, talking today. So the SAGT was heavily focused on looking after our staff, and we have had collective agreements throughout. And then we had some hiccups here and there for various reasons. But we have, in overall, that we have a very good rapport with the unions, and then we deal with them officially, and then also informally, in the sense, we work with them, we meet with them, and we share the business with them. Like, look, this is how the business evolving in the shipping business. So they do understand it. So then, whatever the discussion that we do with them, so they also understand the business side of it when they come into discussions. So having said that, unions are unions, and all these unions are politically affiliated. So they all trying to sort out all their problems with through the union means. So we have been so far very successful, and that otherwise that we can't talk about SAG's success unless we were successful in that front as well. So that like we have our focus or our emphasis on that is very, very heavy, and then we are spending considerable amount of effort to maintain our relationships with the unions. So from the port side, the ports authority side, there's hardly an impact to our people. Whenever something, now the last Saturday there had been an issue at the ports authority, but we never had, our unions are not impacted by those things. So they are not guided by those the leadership there. But at the same time, like our guys are separate, and then they know how we are looking after them. And then like the SAGT IR aspect have been so good. So we were able to maintain peace, I would say 99% during our, the last 26 years.
Right. So it's not that, I mean, each terminal has separate unions. It's not that one union covers a proportion of workers in all the terminals.
No, so the branch unions are separate. So there is no one union covering the entire port, but the unions are affiliated to the mother union. Mother union could
Yeah.
be whatever the union. So they have branches in all many of the terminals.
And there's a labor agreement with wage increases, sort
Yes,
of
we do.
pre-scheduled and
Yeah.
so.
So generally we sign our labor agreement, our collective agreement, we call it, with the participation of the Employees Federation. We negotiate and enter into an agreement for 3 years. So that during that 3 years, everything is specified, the wage increases and whatever, so that we go according to that. And then even during the COVID, that we honored that agreement. So even though that we were facing trouble, but that was appreciated by the unions.
Right. In terms of added value services that SAGT can provide, things like consolidation, deconsolidation, bonded warehousing, like are there things that SAGT are looking at doing in the future?
Now our concession is specifically to handle the containers only. The concession with the government is restricting us doing any warehousing or handling, the stuffing and destuffing, or that kind of the cargo working within the SAGT, and we don't have space either. Yeah, but we do offer various other value-added services like the ITT. When we had trouble in the port a few years back, and we invested on a fleet of our own trucks. And then we have an outsourced operator that we built. We recruited drivers from the ex-Navy who had the background of driving the heavy vehicles. So we trained them, and then we created an outfit where they can handle the ITT, interterminal truck, the connections out of SAGT. That was heavily appreciated by the lines. Even during this current crisis, we have been able to give all the connections out of SAGT because of that, the investment. So similarly, the various other value additions like the digital delivery orders and all those things, we have added, and then we set the trend in motion, and then everybody else follow us. But as Zafir said, like now we are not the new kid on the block anymore. So there is CWIT and East Terminal will be coming up with various new technologies. And then, of course, like the port will evolve, and then port will become a very, very globally competitive place. Yes.
Thank you, Mr. Jinadasa. Mr. Hashim, just to kind of touch on like some of your other responsibilities, John Keells Logistics, for example, how has the landscape been for them in terms of competition? I know logistics-wise, Sri Lanka, it appears to be very competitive from an outside perspective.
Yes, that's true. I think there's a lot of competition in the logistics space, but I think from a customer's perspective, what is required from a logistics provider has changed significantly. So I think that's the great opportunity that people have, because earlier logistics was just pure warehousing and delivery. But today it is a lot more than that. After the COVID, it's really a lot more than that. I mean, customers are really requiring for a lot more visibility, transparency in their supply chain, on-time deliveries, continuous improvement in productivity efficiencies. So really, it's a different sort of requirement that is there from the client today. So in order, I think that's where sort of the parties sort of differentiate, because really there are lots of companies that provide 3PL services, but how you sort of differentiate yourself is from the type of service that you offer to your clients, because that is becoming sort of more and more evident now, especially from large companies, multinational companies. They require a lot more from their 3PL provider than what was there previously. But for us in John Keells Logistics today, in terms of where we are, the phase in which we are today is that we really don't want to grow any more space. Here, it's more about in the investments that we have done to try and see how we can get the maximum return. So that's about not really catering to every segment of the market, but there is a certain segment that we have identified and trying to see how we can cater to that segment, because that's where we see that we can add some value. And also with the type of investments that we have made, and we feel that that's a sort of segment of the client that we can also sort of serve better. Plus also in terms of getting value back for us, that segment we need to concentrate. So really in the next 2 years for us, in terms more than growing space, it is about optimizing on the returns that we have made. I think that's going to be the phase. But we have also got a very lucrative contract which we started in January. This is going to be a very long-term contract that we started on a port operation. So this will be for a few years, and we just started in January. If this works out, this will be very positive for John Keells Logistics growth.
Thanks, Mr. Hashim. And in terms of where the overall sort of Sri Lankan logistics industry stands, what is your perspective? Are there too many players? Is there any real like value addition that is being done, or is it a...
No, as I said, Naveen, I think again this is going to be, because the demand from the customer is not pure warehousing and transportation. That phase is gone. I think now it is a lot more interaction, because it's actually working as partners. Really, it's not like working as two different companies. You are being a 3PL provider. What they're doing is they're sort of handing over a large part of their supply chain, which is very critical to them, to you. So you become an integral part of their business. So your success or failure is going to be the success or failure of that company. So that's a sort of integration that is going to happen. And in order for you to be able to do that, your mindset has to be at that level. Plus the level of technology that is important in that integration is also huge. So today the type, especially these warehouse management systems that you need, it's very costly. If you don't have a very, very sort of advanced warehouse management system, then it will become very difficult for you to provide the type of service that some of these big companies are requiring for. So if you look at some big companies, it's Haley's or us or some of the others, we have invested huge sums of money in getting warehousing management systems. Plus another big part of this business is the transport element of the business. So you've got to have a very good TMS system. And at JKSB, we invested in this system called Info for our warehousing management system. So Info is one of the world's top warehousing management systems that we invested in that about 5 years ago. At that point, honestly, it was a point of differentiation where we sort of using this, we differentiated from the rest of the market. But going forward, honestly, that's going to be a standard that would be required of all 3PL providers.
Thank you, Mr. Hashim. Mr. Jinadasa, one final question for you. I mean, looking at how the Red Sea crisis has perhaps eased off a little bit, and seeing those Middle Eastern ports perhaps coming back into competition, and also these new Indian deep water ports coming into contention, what is SAGT's sort of approach to dealing with that?
You can't stop the competition. Basically the other countries will also start building ports. Like now, especially India and any other part of the world. As I said before, Naveen, we have to get our act together, and we have to be smarter than any of those guys. That we have the advantage of location, and then if you can complement it with various other service propositions as well, and we should become the smartest port in this part of the world. So if that happens, if we can offer the value for money and then unique services, then of course everybody will think that this is the best place to be. Yeah. So that is what now say with the Red Sea crisis has in fact taught us that the lesson. Look, there is a huge opportunity in Colombo if you get it right. So all these guys are coming for you. Like now all these lines started demanding. Look, okay, can we bring the services here? Unfortunately, we didn't have the capacity at that time, but the capacity was a bit late. But if we had built the capacity at that time, as planned previously, and we would have been minting money. Yeah. And then once it is set up and established and then continue to serve, the transshipment hubs remain. as long as you look after and then provide the best services to the lines. Yeah. So otherwise, like the transshipment business also can disappear overnight, because it's very easy to take the ships away and then position themselves in another port somewhere. Yeah. So we have to be smarter. And then, it cannot be only the port. And as Zafir quite rightly said, the bunkering and all of the related industries also have to come on board. Yeah. And then, we have to, as collectively, we should be able to offer a combined service proposition to all the ships calling over at the Colombo. Look, this is what it is.
Thanks a lot, Mr. Jinadasa.
And just Naveen, just one thing, just to add upon what Upul just said. I think, if you look at the capacity that is coming up in the Colombo port with ECT or WCT, honestly, I think one good thing in the Colombo port now is that each of the terminals, they don't look at the other as a competitor. Really, they complement each other, because with WCT coming up and ECT coming up, there'll be much larger vessels that will be coming into the port, which means it will help terminals like SAGT. Because when the overall volume goes up, what happens is it sort of helps each other. So really, as a port, I think how the Port of Colombo is looking at is that all these people are partners in the Port of Colombo, and really trying to pitch the Port of Colombo in the international network to try and see how we can attract. So it's really not a competition internally; it is more sort of working together.
Mr. Hashim, if you could just comment on the JV with Inchcape Shipping Services and how that has progressed over time.
So it's been reasonably good, Naveen. The only thing is, I think for the shipping agency business, the last 2 years overall for Sri Lanka has been quite bad. The shipping agency business, a good portion of that came from Gaul, a lot of services that happened in Gaul. So about when the maritime security risk was at the highest, we used to cater to about 1,200 vessels a month outside Gaul. For 1,200 to 1,500 vessels a month. But now that has kind of really come down. So with the volumes coming down in Gaul, the agency business per se, overall, the shipping agency business in Colombo has got hit over the last 2 years. But saying all this, in the last 3 months, we have seen a good uptick in the business, and hopefully this will continue. But in terms of the partnership itself, just to sort of tell a little bit about our partner, Inchcape, they're the world's largest shipping network agency in the world. They control, on the cruise market, they control about 70% of the world's cruise vessels. So we got the right partner. It's just that the industry itself is currently affected. And we're quite confident once the numbers come in, then this business will do reasonably well.
Thanks a lot. And I mean, just to kind of ask about the relationship that we have with our other JVs, with DHL and with Maersk and so on, what JKH brings to that partnership and so on.
As you know, the transportation sector of John Keells, we have, partnerships have been a very important part. We have actually thrived on partnership. Each of our big businesses have been with international global partners. And if you look at it, most of these partnerships have been there for a very, very long time. So DHL business is still doing very well. We are the largest market share. We have 62% of the courier business market, and that has been always the case. We have been leading in that market share area. But the business itself got impacted with the garment volumes coming down, because a large portion of this business is garment samples being sort of sent outside the country. So in the last year, with the garment volumes coming down, we have seen a bit of a drop. But now, of course, with the issue that we are facing in Bangladesh and things like that, we have seen that business coming back again. So generally, DH is a very profitable business for us, and it's doing reasonably well. Maersk, again, the shipping agency, as you know, there's the world's second largest shipping agency business. With the terminal business increasing, Maersk's volumes into Colombo will increase, and the agency business also will continue to do well.
Thanks a lot, Mr. Hashim. Thank you so much, gentlemen. I got a bit greedy and I went a little bit over time. I hope you don't mind. And thank you to everybody who joined us today. Please join us again for a couple of other deep dives that we'll do on various sectors. But thank you, Mr. Zafir Hashim, and thank you, Mr. Upul Jinadasa, for taking the time out of your day to join us today.
Thank you, Naveen. My pleasure.
Thank you. Thank you, Naveen.
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone.